Bobby, back. Got a different one today. This story's less about a bad relationship and more about what happens after. About how a quiet person dismantles someone's entire setup. Insurance, phone plan, car cosign, while he's still texting asking when she's coming home. Some people don't fight when you hurt them. They don't yell, they don't cry, they don't post about it. They just slowly walk you out of their life like you were furniture they finally decided didn't match. The line that opened this whole thing: her dad had a stroke. She's spending evenings at a rehab unit 4 nights a week. And her boyfriend, 2 years in, texts her, "I miss the old you." He meant the version of her that wasn't doing that. Her name's Claire. His name's Drew. He worked in consulting. Was between projects for 2 years. On her insurance, her phone plan, her car's co-signed the entire time. She worked, he coasted. And when she had to actually use her support system for somebody who mattered, that's when he sent that text. I keep coming back to this one. It's not the loudest betrayal story I've come across. There's no slap at a wedding, no screaming on a porch. The big public scene happens once, in the middle, in the worst possible place. And the rest of it is what she does after, quietly, with paperwork, while he keeps talking to a room that doesn't have her in it anymore. All right, let me walk you through it. The 2 people in this story lived on a small island. Gated, palms, a bridge in and out, 3-story buildings the color of seashells. The kind of place where everybody knows whose dog that is. She thought she'd live there forever. He thought he'd live there forever too. Only one of them was right. Her name in the version I have is Claire. Mid-30s, the quiet one in any room. Office job, the kind where she's the person who actually remembers the passwords. She grew up in the house on this island. Her dad Henry bought it before the area got fancy. 8 years ago, her mom passed. Henry stayed. Claire moved back in just for a bit while he gets the hang of it. And the bit kept extending until living with Dad quietly turned into taking care of Dad.
Drew came along 2 years before this story turns. Charming the first night you met him. Charming the second. Third night, you started to notice he told the same 3 stories. He moved into the house at month 14. Just temporarily. By month 20, his name was on her phone plan. Her health insurance, his COBRA ran out. The refinance on her car, his name as co-signer because her credit was higher. Drew worked in consulting. Drew was between projects. Drew had been between projects, by anyone's count, for the entire 2 years he'd lived in her father's house. Lock this in. Claire was, on paper, his entire infrastructure. He was, structurally, a guest who had stopped knocking. 10 months before the night this story turns, Henry had a stroke. He survived. He survived well. The kind of recovery doctors call cautiously optimistic. But he came back wrong. Not all the way wrong. Just enough. Left hand wouldn't fully close, speech a half second behind. He called the refrigerator the cold cabinet for 3 weeks before that one resolved. And he couldn't drive. Which meant Claire. At the hospital, then the rehab wing, then the outpatient program, 4 to 5 evenings a week for almost 3 months. She made the same drive she's about to make right now, every weekday, for 70-some nights. Same parking lot, same elevator, same chair beside the same bed. And on day 3 after the stroke, while Henry was still in the ICU upstairs, Drew said something that, in hindsight, was the whole story in one sentence. He said, "I get it. But at some point, we're gonna need to talk about what this means for us. She thought he meant their finances. He meant his weekends. He stopped showing up to the visits. Then he stopped not showing up. He just didn't come. Then he started texting her every single evening while she was sitting in her dad's hospital room. Not, "How's your dad?" Not, "Do you need anything?" The same 5 words every night. "When are you coming home?" Red flag number 1. Someone who turns your father's medical crisis into a scheduling complaint. And then, week 6, Drew sent the text. "I miss the old you." The old you. The old you. As in the version of her that wasn't spending evenings at a rehab unit helping her father relearn how to button a shirt. The old you. As in the convenient one. The one whose entire life was within reach of his couch. And I'm going, wait. Sir, my guy, the old her is still in the same house. You don't miss her. You miss being entertained. And here's where this stops being a normal complaint story and starts being something else. Because that text was the warning. What comes next is the night that ended them. Drew finally came to the hospital. First time in 19 days. He didn't come upstairs. He texted her from the lobby and said he'd meet her in the cafeteria. So she went down. Leggings, hospital-branded zip-up she'd grabbed from the gift shop 3 weeks earlier because she got cold one night. No makeup, hair in the bun she put up when she was helping her dad with therapy. She looked, by her own description, like a tired person who had been a tired person for a long time. Drew was at a corner table. He looked great. Fresh shave, new shirt, cologne. Cologne in a hospital cafeteria. That's the detail that told me, when I read it, everything I needed to know about how this evening was gonna go. He hadn't come there to see her. He'd come there dressed for an announcement. He opened with, quote, "We need to talk," end quote. Then he said he'd been doing a lot of thinking. He said he loved her. But, and there it is, the word every adult should be scared of. He wasn't sure they wanted the same things anymore. She asked what he meant. He went into a monologue. The longer he talked, the more you could tell he'd written it down beforehand. Phrases like, "I deserve to feel alive." Phrases like, "I'm watching my best years go by." And then, the phrase, the one. "You've gotten so quiet. You used to be fun. I look at you now and I see somebody's mother." Somebody's mother. She was, at that moment, the only person in her family. Her mom was gone. Her father was upstairs. And Drew, the man who'd been on her health insurance for 18 months while floating between projects, was using the word mother like it was a slur. She didn't cry. Lock this in. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't ask follow-ups. The version I have describes the moment in one sentence. Quote, "I watched his mouth move, and I realized I couldn't hear him anymore." End quote. She stood up. She picked up her phone. She picked up her zip-up, and she said one word. "Okay." That was the entire response. Okay. And then she walked back to the elevator, and he followed her in because he wasn't done. He's going, "That's it? Okay? That's all you have to say?" He's getting louder. In a hospital elevator. There's an older man in there with a get-well balloon just staring at the floor numbers like he wants to be anywhere else. She didn't respond. The doors opened on her dad's floor. She stepped out. He stepped out. Still going. He was escalating in the hallway. And here's where Owen enters. her cousin, lived 2 doors down from Henry on the same island. Contracts lawyer. The one who said he tells the same 3 stories at a barbecue 2 years ago. He was on the floor that night, dropping off an audiobook for Henry. He saw Drew yelling. Owen didn't yell back. He just positioned himself between Drew and the door to Henry's room and said quietly, "Not here, not now. Go home." Drew got in his car and drove off. He was, in his own head, the wronged party. He was going to call her later. He was going to give her time to think. It was the last conversation he would ever have with her. Quick recap. Claire's upstairs with her father. Drew's in his car, driving back across the bridge to the island where he still thinks he lives. He thinks the relationship's in trouble. He hasn't yet figured out it's over. And Claire, sitting in her dad's hospital room that night, she's already started doing math in her head he won't catch up to for 5 weeks. She didn't text him back. Didn't block him, and you'll see why. She just didn't answer. He sent 14 messages over 2 days. Sorry, then defensive, then angry, then a long voice memo that opened with, quote, "I know you're going through a lot, but I need you to consider how this is affecting me," end quote. She listened once. She didn't reply. The voice memo was 11 minutes long. She listened to it once, in the hospital parking lot, in the car with the windows up. He opened with, and this is real, he said he'd been doing a lot of journaling. He said the relationship had felt one-sided for a long time and that he'd given up his own momentum to be there for her. He used the phrase, "my own journey," twice. He said he worried she changed and he wasn't sure he recognized her anymore. There was a section in the middle where his voice got quiet, and he said he still loved her and he wanted to figure this out. And then there was a section near the end, and I want to be precise here, where he asked, very specifically, whether she was going to stay on top of the car insurance renewal coming up in 3 weeks. Because he needed to know, for planning purposes. She never replied. Day 3, she called Owen, told him everything, including the part nobody else knew. She'd been quietly uncomfortable about Drew's finances for about 4 months. Owen was the kind of person who came to the hospital without being asked and left without making a thing of it. He'd been 2 doors down from Henry on that island most of his adult life. He went to school with Claire's older brother, who'd moved away years ago and wasn't really in this story. Owen was in his late 30s, contracts law for a real estate group and a small private equity firm. He had a dry sense of humor he deployed rarely and precisely. He was also, and this is the part that mattered, the only person in Claire's orbit who had known both her parents. He'd given a toast at her mother's funeral. He called Henry every other Sunday. That was the context in which he showed up, every time. Not as a lawyer, as family. She told him everything. Specifically, the car registration. He'd co-signed, then quietly added himself as a named driver on her insurance. She paid the premium. She had a vague memory of approving it and no memory of agreeing to the bump it caused. The phone plan. He was on her family plan, which meant she had access to his data usage. His usage spiked every weekday in the 4 to 7 p.m. window, the exact window she was at the hospital. The actual number was something like 42% more data usage than any previous month. Not a blip, a pattern. A very consistent, very geographic pattern. Claire cross-referenced the dates against something she had available. His old texts to her, which she hadn't deleted. The nights his usage spiked heaviest were nights Drew had told her he was working late or meeting a client. Drew worked in consulting. Between projects. the consulting apparently happened in very specific directions, geographically. And she was able to infer a radius from the tower data that the carrier helpfully summarizes in the account overview section. Claire wasn't looking for that. She went into the plan to change her own data tier. The information was sitting there, sorted by device, waiting for someone to look at the columns in order.
Claire sat with that for about 10 minutes. Then she put her phone down and went back to sit with her father. The health insurance. Drew was on her plan, which meant Claire's HR portal, which she'd been logging into for Henry's FMLA paperwork, also showed Claire every claim Drew had filed in the past year, including pharmacy claims dated to hotels in cities Drew had told her he'd never been to. Claire printed nothing. She didn't send it to anyone. She sat in her car in the hospital parking lot for 6 minutes after pulling those records. She said later that she counted for some reason. And then she went inside. The pattern in the pharmacy claims was not subtle once you knew where to look. Prescription fills timed to hotel zip codes. The same name on the insurance. Cities Claire had never heard Drew mention. One of them was the same weekend Drew had told her he couldn't come visit because he had a work thing. That work thing was in a different state. Different pharmacy, same name on the card. Claire didn't cry about that either. The version I have describes it the same way Claire described the cafeteria. She just watched her own understanding update, quietly, like a number changing on a screen. No soundtrack, no dramatic moment. Just, now I know this.
Owen, when Claire told him, said one thing. He said, "We don't need that. We already have enough." And he was right. Those records never came up. They stayed in the folder. They were just the reason she didn't feel a single moment of guilt about what happened next. By the time Claire got off the phone with Owen, she wasn't building a case from suspicion. She was building it from receipts that had been sitting in her HR portal for months, just waiting for her to look. Owen, the contracts lawyer, said one thing on that call that I want every quiet person listening to hear. He said, "We're not going to do anything to him. We're going to stop doing things for him." Over the next 2 weeks, in order, Claire removed Drew from her phone plan. Carrier mailed him a notice. He didn't open it for 9 days.
Claire removed Drew from her health insurance, effective the end of the month. HR mailed Drew a letter. He didn't see it. It went to the house on the island, where he'd stopped checking the mail because she had. Claire refinanced the car in her name only. The dealership required Drew's signature to release him as co-signer. Owen drafted the document, mailed it certified. The package contained 2 things. The lender's standard co-signer release form, correctly completed and notarized, and a 1-page letter from Owen explaining that as Drew may have received correspondence from the lender regarding account updates, he should sign where indicated and return in the enclosed pre-stamped envelope. The pre-stamped envelope was a nice touch. Drew got the package on a Tuesday. He signed it that afternoon. Didn't call Claire, didn't call the lender, mailed it back the same day. By Friday, his name was off the account. Drew signed without reading. He thought it was routine. He had, in that signature, removed his only legal claim to a car he'd been driving for 18 months. And the cleanest move? Claire went into her HR portal and screenshotted every pharmacy claim filed under his name. She didn't send them anywhere. She didn't post them. She made a folder, named it Receipts, backed it up. That folder was the nuclear option. She didn't use it. She just had it. Because as Owen told Claire in a sentence I'll carry around, the leverage you don't use is the leverage that actually works. In the 5 weeks between the cafeteria and the lobby, Drew was not idle. He told his friends the relationship had run its course and that he'd ended things.
He posted some things online that were clearly about moving on. Vague enough to be deniable, specific enough that people who knew him understood the angle he was going for. He started going to the gym again. He texted Claire 11 more times over those 5 weeks, not counting the original 14 from the first 2 days. The texts ranged from "Hey" to "I've been thinking" to "I hope Henry's okay" to "I've been doing some reflecting and I'd like to talk when you're ready." Drew was doing the math wrong the entire time. He thought Claire was in the processing phase. He thought Claire was hurt and quiet and waiting. Drew was waiting her out.
Drew didn't know there was nothing to wait out. 5 weeks after the cafeteria, Drew showed up at the hospital. Flowers, rehearsed speech. Drew was at the front desk asking which room Henry was in. Owen was there. Of course he was. Owen had been Henry's secondary contact at the hospital for 2 months. He met Drew at the elevator. He didn't yell, didn't threaten. He did the most lawyer thing imaginable. Handed Drew a single sheet of paper, folded twice, and said, "I think you should read this before you go up." The sheet was a polite, single-paragraph letter. "Claire is no longer in a relationship with you. She does not wish to be contacted. Your name has been removed from the relevant accounts. If you have personal belongings at the house on the island, the date and time you may collect them is below, with a third party present. Any further contact with Claire or Henry will be considered harassment. Have a good evening." That was the whole document. No lawsuit, no demand. Just, here's the new reality. Have a good evening. Drew read it in the lobby. He looked up. Owen had already walked away, gone back upstairs to sit with Henry. Drew left the flowers on the lobby front desk. They went to a woman who just delivered her second grandchild on the maternity floor. So at least the flowers had a good night. 3 months after the cafeteria, Henry was discharged. Full discharge. Outpatient follow-ups only. The morning of, he buttoned his own shirt. He did it slowly. Claire watched him do it without helping. He looked up at her when he was done, and he didn't say anything. And they both knew. Claire drove Henry home, across the bridge to the island. Henry didn't say much. Claire didn't either. That evening, they walked down to the bay. Henry used the cane for the first half of the walk and stopped using it for the second half. He just handed it to Claire. Quietly.
There were a couple of older folks on the walkway, a couple of girls farther down, taking pictures of the water, the bridge in the distance, some boats. A seagull that, according to the version of this I have, circled them twice. I'm only including that because Claire noticed. The sun went down. Neither of them said Drew's name. Drew, structurally, was somewhere else, pretending to his friends he'd ended the relationship. He'd moved in with his mom. His mom, and this is a small detail I love, his mom and Claire stayed in light contact. His mom was Team Claire. Quietly. Claire and Henry walked back to the car. He didn't take the cane back. She carried it. They drove home. That's the end of the part where things happen. The rest of it is just math finishing. Okay. So, the thing I keep coming back to is the loudest moment in this story is a man calling a woman somebody's mother in a hospital cafeteria. And the quietest moment is the same woman 5 weeks later carrying her father's cane back along a walkway by the bay. And both of those were her. The loud version was him projecting. The quiet version was her actually existing. He never met the quiet version. He only ever met his own annoyance with her. I'm not gonna make this a moral of the story thing. I'll just leave you with Owen's line, because it's been sitting with me since I read it.
the leverage you don't use is the leverage that actually works. She had every right to burn that man's life down. The entire reason she didn't is the entire reason she got to keep her own.
About a year after the cafeteria, Henry had a second stroke. Smaller, different part of the brain. He recovered faster, partly because of the protocols Claire already knew, partly because his medication schedule had stayed tighter after the first one, and partly because the physical therapy had quietly never stopped. She kept doing the stretches with him in the living room, twice a week, even after the outpatient program ended. The doctors called it proactive maintenance. She called it Tuesday mornings. The second hospital stay was 4 nights, not 3 months. She knew the floor, knew the nurses by name, knew which parking level had the fastest elevator. She had a system.
During that stay, Drew sent one text. One. It said, quote, "I heard about your dad. I'm here if you need anything." End quote. Claire read it. She opened her receipts folder. She looked at it for a moment. Claire didn't reply. Claire didn't block him. She took one screenshot of one pharmacy claim from the folder. One of the hotel ones. One of the cities he'd never been to. And she saved it right next to his text. Didn't send it. Just filed it. Like she was cataloging a fact about someone she might one day need to remember. Then Claire closed the folder and went to ask Henry if he wanted to watch anything. About a year after that, Henry started driving again. Short distances. He called it his comeback tour. Claire sat in the passenger seat. She didn't offer to take the wheel. And then Claire went back to work. That's the one. That's Bobby POV. If you've been carrying a story around, and you know what I mean by carrying, drop it in the comments or send it in. I do read them. Take care of your people. I'll be back soon.